2 years since I seen home. 2 years. It's fucking war.
At 0600 hours, we will begin training to go to war.
This is not dog company. This is easy company. The first and finest company in this regiment.
Each trooper will learn this operation by heart and know his mission to the detail.
We're invading Europe, my friend.
All you have to do is remember what you were taught. I guarantee you gravity will take care of the rest.
We are on the eve of the largest action in the history of warfare. It's Normandy.
We all do our jobs. Everything will be fine.
Scared. We're all scared.
What made you decide to join the paratroopers?
Fire!
I wanted to fight with the best, sir.
Tonight, we're gonna have to cross the river.
These crowds are gonna catch some hell.
We're gonna have to find another way into Germany.
Easy, you'll head up the mountain through the Obersalzberg. Take the Eagle's Nest.
Man, it's been a long war. It's been a tough war. We fought bravely, proudly for your country. We're a special group. We found in one another a bond that exists only in combat.
Oh, get chills just watching that, even though I've seen the show God knows how many times. Welcome at the usual time, despite me thinking we might go a bit later this weekend, to the special Chew the Fat episode of Band of Brothers, the series. We're up to episode 8. Can you believe it? We're on episode 8. So I've got a fantastic panel of awesome people to come in and talk about the show. Watched episode 8 probably for the 40th time just the other day. I've made my comprehensive notes as always, so we'll be getting into that in a little bit. But let me say hello to the chat. Good to see Dancing Dog Films here. History Bro, I'm sure I know that name from somewhere. Jacoby, good to see you. And Nav Arian, how are we doing? Keith is in the house. So I like to be able to do that while I still can, while the chat is relatively quiet. But first, the man who's just arrived by Uber, it's Blue Collar Loser.
Speaking of, you see it, Neil McDonough, the official Tulsa King trailer. Oh, God, he's in it.
Oh, season 2.
Yes.
It's going to be some kind of super, like, mean heavy. That's going to be good.
September 15th, man. I love Neil McDonough.
Damn, well, maybe we're going to have to do a Tulsa King stream. So, you know. But if anyone can intimidate Sylvester Stallone into coming on as a guest, it'll be History Bro with his evil eyebrow. How are you, sir?
I'm all good, thanks, Lance. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Not too bad. Nice sedate weekend. No raving. But next weekend I'm going to one, so I probably won't be on camera next Sunday. Right. Okay. So moving on, we also have the man from the Northern Wastes, standing watch on the wall, Northern English B-starred. How are you?
Hail, you beautiful bastards. I'm doing fine. How are you lot?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad. We have got the inside man, but he's had some technical issues. So he's trying to connect again right now. So I'll bring him on when I can see he's connected. But okay, the episode 8, The Last Patrol, set in the town of Hagenau. And interestingly enough, I had a butcher's at Hagenau on Google Earth recently because I thought I was just kind of curious to see, you know, how big this river is, and it was really small. It's not a big river. We're not talking the Rhine here, and roughly also at the place where they were kind of facing off the Germans. I mean, obviously the town is built up quite a bit now. So as we go on tonight, I will get that up on Google Earth.
Well,
so
one
you
thing
guys can have a look
about
at
that,
it.
Lance, right away, Stephen Ambrose talks about how you're quite right. It's not a giant river, but
No.
in February 45, it was swollen. It broken its banks, and it was
Right.
it was between 30 and 100 meters wide.
Oh, okay.
In
So it was
45.
yeah, so bigger than it had been kind of previously, I suppose.
Yeah, much
Yeah.
bigger than it usually was. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, crossing any river, even a small one, in February when you've got full combat gear on, you're right way down with a weapon, and you don't want to go in the water, really, do you? If you can help
Oh,
it.
it's still freezing. They're saying it was still
Yeah.
snowing and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, that's always best avoided if possible. Excellent. Well, we'll be looking at that in a little bit. Inside Man has arrived. Hurrah!
Hey, hello.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm so sorry for being a little bit on the late side. I've had some terrible connection issues at the moment. So, but yeah, it seems to be leveling out a little bit now. So apologies for that. But how's everyone doing?
We are good.
Yeah, we're doing fine.
Looking forward to
oh yeah,
good.
Getting into it on episode 8. So yeah, I'm just sort of getting all my screens ready. Here's a familiar looking man on the Hagenau set. Who's this? Yeah, so we've got some interesting behind the scenes, but let's do the usual. I'll plow through the story, which actually this episode there's something more simplistic about it than some of the others. I'll get, and that's not a criticism of it in any sense, but I'll get into that. So Blue Collar, is this your first window for showing stuff?
I would start with the older gentleman, just because sometimes the things they say are sometimes more powerful in the actual episode.
Yeah,
depending on the dialogue, it's haunting.
Okay, so Band of Brothers, episode 8, The Last Patrol. Now, the narrative for this episode is very much Webster. I think his full name was David Webster, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Who's a character that we've already met in other episodes, but he was injured in Holland. So he missed Bastogne and didn't rejoin Easy Company until they were in the town of Hagenau, or one side of the town, which was split by a river. The role is played by Ian Bailey, who I have to say I think is an absolutely superb actor, and I'd like to see him in more. He kind of reminds me of like a young Timothy Bottoms. It kind of really looks like Timothy Bottoms.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask, so was that name legit right there? The battered bastards of Bastogne. It's just
yeah.
Oh my god,
right. That's what they were called. This episode is directed by Tony Toe, and in addition to obviously Stephen Ambrose, the other two writers' credits on this episode are Eric Bork and Bruce C. McKenna. Okay, all right. So we're going to get into it. Let me run through the story. So it's February 1945, and I've got a question for the Inside Man. Is the set of Hagenau, the Foy set, redressed?
It's actually the Carentan set redressed.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I can see that from the bandstand actually.
Yeah.
Because that's on both sets. Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So Webster arrives back. David Webster, he's an intellectual man. He went to Harvard. He's previously had the men take the piss out of him. So there is a bit of a sort of a class gap with him and the other men already. And when he arrives back, the men don't welcome him. One of the things that Webster notices is that a lot of people are missing. He asks about Private Hubler. He's told Hubler's dead. Jackson comments to him, nobody seems to want him in their platoon. And Private Jackson, who's played by Andrew Lee Potts, who, by the way, is a friend of mine, and I have invited him to come on, and he's actually got the link for tonight because he features heavily in this episode. So we have a bit of dialogue with him. That setup is quite important because Private Jackson has not been seen in any other episodes. So I think Mr. Potts did it as a guest. probably came on just to shoot this episode and then was gone again. So Webster converses with Malarkey. He ends up going to have a meeting with Captain Spears. Spears is very dismissive of where he should end up and it's just like, yeah, fine, go and join that platoon. So as Webster narrates this episode, we find out Winters is now running the battalion, and he states that all of the experience that he's had with Easy Company counts for nothing, despite being with them from the beginning, due to the fact that he missed being in Bastogne with the rest of the company. Lipton is suffering from pneumonia. We get introduced to Lieutenant Jones, who is played by Colin Hanks, son of Tom Hanks, the less troublesome son, I think it's fair to say. I'm going to talk about Hanks's acting later, but he is playing a new officer who's just arrived, West Point trained, and he's been sort of pushed on the company to get some experience, kind of almost like get some experience on his CV and, you know, continue his kind of ascent to officer ranks above. So both him and Webster have one thing in common. Easy Company doesn't welcome them, and they don't get any warmth from any of the other men. They're not particularly wanted by anyone, yet they find that that's where they've got to be. When we first see Captain Spears, he's looting. He's carrying like a massive clock, which is a theme with his character that continues for the rest of the show. So we find out that Easy Company have got to do a patrol over the river into the town of Hagenau. The Americans control one bank, the Germans control the other bank. Hagenau is an old medieval town, and it's got like almost like a fortified river that goes around the old town, like a lot of them did for protection back in the old days, and working quite well for the favor of the Germans here. So running from snipers, they go and talk to Sergeant Malarkey. And then at one point, shells start coming in, which are being fired from moaning minis. You can tell that because of the sound effect, because they make a particular sound. So Jones says to Malarkey, do you want to introduce me to the men? And so there's this very kind of brief introduction with the lieutenant. And this line is said that, you know, everyone's kind of looking forward to going home. The war's nearly ended. So I don't think anyone wants to do anything stupid at this point. And we have a scene with showers where people are getting a shower. Any man in combat will tell you that having a hot shower after a couple of weeks in combat where you haven't had any hot water is like a massive morale boost. It's a huge mental health thing. So even though it's freezing, it's February, the showers are outside, they are hot showers. So everyone's like stripping off to get in for those. Shelling comes in, so everybody runs into the basement. And there's a character that's killed by a mortar. I think it's a Private Bill Keane. It's Bill Keane. Christiansen, who is the big actor, I forget his name now, stands looking over his body. Sorry, let me get that guy's name. Oh, it's just gone completely out.
Fassbender, is it?
Fassbender, thank you. Michael Fassbender, yeah. Stands looking over his body. That's an interesting shot, because both him and Andrew Lee Potts kind of position themselves to make sure they're in that shot. And I don't know whether the actors did that as they're like, hey, let's make sure we get in this shot, or if they were directed to do that. But it does draw focus onto their characters, which in the case of Andrew Lee Potts' character, who we haven't really met before, Private Jackson, is actually quite important. There's we then have a meeting that takes place. Lipton and Malarkey call second platoon. Malarkey is to lead a patrol over the river. They want to go and capture some Germans and blow up an observation post that they've got in a building on the other side. But Malarkey's not really keen on going, so there's a conversation about Lieutenant Jones leading the patrol instead of him, and there's kind of a plot to make that happen. There's a bit of an error in the production here, which I found a bit annoying. Earlier, it's established that they have to move very carefully between buildings because of sniper fire. Yet in this shot, Malarkey and Jones are standing in the alley out in the open looking directly at the German line. It's kind of annoying. And I picked up on that and thought that was a bit of a bad gaffe. I think it's the reverse of this. It might be. But anyway, you can see directly to the German buildings on the other side of the river. So they would not have stood and had that conversation there. Lutz is looking for supplies. George Lutz. Everyone's trying to scrounge food. Conti has just come back. He was injured in Bastogne. He also arrives back. Now, when he arrives back, there's this great scene where there's this contrast of greeting. And Eon Bailey, who's playing Webster, gives this look. And you can see how he feels. Like all the other men rush to greet Piconte. They welcome him. There's all this warmth and camaraderie. It's the total reverse of the cold reception that Webster got, where Webster's kind of criticized for not breaking out of hospital and trying to get back to easy company. So then the men are kind of, this is like the supply section. Everybody's looking to pillage some chocolate. So then Spears and Winter, they have a meeting at the CP, 1700 hours. Lieutenant Jones is leading the patrol. 15 men are there waiting for a briefing. Winters arrives. They have the briefing. And Webster manages to get Liebgott switched out of the patrol as well. Nice little shot with Shifty heating his rifle sight. I like that. That was cool. So it feels like quite a few of these guys on the patrol. There's a few actors on this patrol that I don't think we've seen in many episodes. Jackson being one of them. I think this is the only time we've met Jackson. Webster narrates the story here about going over to the patrol, and everybody wants in. Lieutenant Jones wants in because it's his last chance to see action. The supply guy, he wants in because all he's ever done is kind of log in supplies. He's never even fired his rifle. So he begs Winters to go on the patrol. So eventually everyone that wants to go on the patrol gets to go on the patrol. So they go over the river in these small little dinghy things. One boat capsizes. Inside Man, were you in the bodies that went over the river?
No, I wasn't. No. I was actually, funny enough, on this particular day, I was actually on another unit, on a completely different unit. So no, I wasn't there for the boats. No.
Did you hear how cold it was in the water from the people?
Very cold.
Yeah, it does.
Very cold. Apparently, yeah,
looks cold. So they get over unseen. They get to the house, and they chuck a smoke grenade into the house. Jackson goes and throws a grenade in, but he goes in too quickly, and he gets hit by his own grenade as he comes through the door. They take 3 German prisoners. Chaos reigns. We see Sergeant Martin, played by Dexter Fletcher. He really comes into his own here. We see his leadership. They get Eugene Jackson back over to the other side. Everybody gets back from the patrol, but Jackson dies. And Jackson's death was needless and could have been avoided. Even the mailroom corporal is kind of crying here. Am I switching on to the next one? That one? Or this one?
Yeah, that one right there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a bit of a debrief with Winters and Nixon. Webster feels guilty about the whole thing. They want to do another patrol that night. There's a wounded German that they had to leave on the bank who's constantly calling out. A few minutes later, the OP explodes. Cobb gets drunk and he starts like abusing people verbally. And sort of people kind of get into it with him. There's a great sunset shot of the OP. I think it's just before it blows up. So because this patrol was successful and they captured some Germans, Sink wants another one. Basically expecting more of the same. Winters feels that this mission is unwarranted. No one wants to go because, of course, the Germans will be expecting them. So the chances of them getting over unseen this time are extremely unlikely. In fact, they're more likely to get massacred. There's a briefing scene. Then a couple of people get promoted, including Malarkey, I think. And then Easy Company get told that they're coming off the line to rest. Winters is promoted to Major. Webster has a final speech about the whole episode, and it ends with some text telling us that Easy Company has fought in France, they've fought in Holland. Now they're going to fight in Germany, and that's the end of the episode. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna go through in our usual order, and we're gonna cover this section first.
The first and finest company in this regiment.
Each trooper will learn this operation by heart.
Okay, story and history of this episode. So, history, bro. As I defer to your expertise on all matters of factual debate, I'm dying to know. And I mean, I could have done some rereading, but I thought I knew you'd be all over this. Is it true that Winters did cancel that second mission on the Quiet?
Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
Disobeyed orders from the colonel. Yeah. I've got a great section on that. So this episode is just one short. It's very tight, isn't it? It's only takes place over a couple of days at most.
Yeah.
So a lot of the other episodes, like there's one episode about all of Market Garden, right? One episode about all of D-Day. So this is different in so far as how tight and focused it is. And in fact, the book, quite a lot of episodes are 2 chapters or more than 2 chapters worth, makes up one episode. This is one chapter and the shortest chapter in the book. So they obviously made a decision that they wanted to just zoom in and focus on this. But nonetheless, having said all that, it like everything else in Band of Brothers, it's pretty damn accurate. But there's loads of little details in this which they either leave out or have deliberately changed for some reason. So I thought I could just highlight a bunch of those.
Yeah.
So first of all, the opening chapter, or opening paragraph rather, from the chapter. Before I say that though, let's remember February 1945. If anyone doesn't know, the war is so done. It's so done. The Soviets are in Germany.
Yeah.
In January 1945, the Soviets bit off a massive chunk. Well, they finished occupying and invading Poland and took a massive chunk out of East Germany in January 45. So, I mean, they're not that far from Berlin by February 45, really, in the scheme of things. The wars are all but over. That's something you sort of need to bear in the back of your mind. And also, Hagenau is quite big. It's got a population, or had back then, a population of 20,000. To put that into some perspective, Carentan had a population of about 4,000. Marmilon had a population of 4,500. Bastogne only 5,500. So Hagenau is actually quite big. It's actually quite a big. It's a full town rather than a village or anything. So that's the first thing. So Ambrose tells us this. In mid-January, despite desperate to save what they could of their men and equipment in the Bulge, the Germans launched a diversionary operation in Alsace, codenamed Northwind.
That's right, yeah. I remember that.
In an attempt to draw American troops from the Ardennes area, as in the mid-December attack in the Ardennes, they struck a thinly held sector of the front. When Patton's Third Army left Alsace to go to the Ardennes, US 7th Army had slid in on its left to take over the position, as well as holding its own. When Northwind began, Eisenhower sent the 101st to Alsace to bolster the line. Winters himself said of this, "My God, don't they have anybody else in the army to plug these gaps?" Okay, so, and they were already thinking about the Pacific and what they called the big jump. Loads of guys thought that they were going to do a massive parachute jump into Tokyo or wherever in Japan. There was going to be the big jump in Japan. So a lot of people's minds are already going towards that. The other thing is they mentioned in this that there's a big railway gun long way behind the German lines.
Yeah.
And they're not sure if it was a 205mm gun or whether it was more like a 16-inch naval gun. But whatever it was, one of those shells would destroy a whole house in one go. And obviously that's terrifying. Webster plays a massive part in the book, the Ambrose book.
Yeah.
it quotes from Webster loads in this chapter. So no wonder in the TV episode they have Webster as the narrator, because that just makes total sense. And Webster wrote a lot about it, a lot of letters back to his parents, and then he wrote about it later in life. So there's a lot from Webster about that. Webster said this: in keeping with the best airborne tradition of relying on madmen instead of firepower, 6 of us with 1 BAR, a machine gun, relieved 79th Division doggies with a water-cooled 50 cal and an air-cooled 30 caliber machine gun. So they're taking over from the 79th Division, and they're in that house, right? A lot. You see them in that house a lot. So we hear a little bit about. We hear a bit about that house. We're told the building the first squad of 1st Platoon occupied was a wreck. Sections of walls had been blasted away, the roof partially removed by mortar shells, all the windows broken, the floors ankle deep in plaster, bricks and broken glass, the banisters ripped off for firewood, the toilets choked with excreta, the basement a cesspool of ashes, ordure, also means shit, and ration cans. And yet Tom McCreary said, "We got it made." So they were still happy with that. They're still more than happy with that, which is what they do sort of hint at in the episode, don't they? Another great little paragraph here I picked out. It says, on the island, because they were, the Germans had the North Bank and the Americans had the South Bank. Well, it was a little bit of an island there. And Ambrose tells us, on the island, movement by day was impossible. Snipers were always ready to blast anyone caught in the open. The least movement would bring down mortars. 2 or 3 men outside would justify a couple of rounds of 88. So Webster recorded, our major recreation was eating. We spent more time preparing, cooking and consuming food than any other pursuit. Another few lines here about that monster cannon firing from way behind the lines. It was a low velocity. So it was so far away, it might have been like 10 miles away, a 16-inch gun, like 10, even 15 miles is totally doable. So it was so far away, you couldn't hear the bang. And of course, the shell is supersonic. So you don't hear the bang, but because it's a low velocity shell, you hear it incoming for ages, surprisingly long time. Shifty said that he would be looking out of the window on the 3rd floor. It's an observation post, right? He'd be on the 3rd floor and he'd hear one incoming. He'd have time to go down to the cellar before it hit, which is a remarkable thing to me. That's absolutely remarkable. Big section here about the spectacle of war. How men love to, like, actually, if you're a proper vet, you get used to it. You love to see things blown up. That's just an interesting note. Another line here from Webster talking about fires. He says, quote, there's something eerie about a fire in combat. The huge, bold flames seem so alien and strident in a situation where neither side dares show the tiniest of a match flame. Because, of course, the classic, isn't it? Like, if you smoke a cigarette or light a lighter, you'll get shot by a sniper. But if there's a general fire, well, no one's putting it out or anything. And so it's just incongruous, really. Webster said that when he got back to the front, he was home again. Quote, I am home again. He wrote to his parents, his poor parents. Another quick bit, a bit about here, how soldiers love when you're in it and when you're living day to day, hour to hour. You sort of you grow to love destruction and annihilation, and even seeing the enemy get killed, you sort of love it and you whoop it up. You see one of your snipers take out one of theirs, and you all cheer and dance around, enjoy it and stuff, which is obviously a bit alien to normal people. There's a line here Ambrose quotes from Ernst Jünger. If anyone doesn't know who Ernst Jünger is a World War I and World War II veteran, but he wrote Storm of Steel, an incredible account of World War I fighting. But Ernst Jünger wrote of, quote, the monstrous desire for annihilation which hovers over a battlefield. A neutral observer might have perhaps believed that we were seized by an excess of happiness. When you see a battle or any fighting going your way, sort of literally dancing around in joy. Another quick line from Webster here. He said, life became strictly a day-to-day and hour-to-hour affair, which, again, normal civilians like us can't really imagine that very much. Line or two on Jones. Jones is described as cocky, clean-cut and likeable. Now, let's get into the things that are a bit different from what you see in the show. in the episode, Nixon explicitly says at one point, this raid, the order for this raid comes straight from Sync, so don't blame me. Well, in the book, it's made clear it was Nixon's idea. Nixon himself had asked Winters for this raid because he's the intelligence officer, isn't he, of the thing?
Right. Okay, that's interesting. That's not how it comes over in the show.
In the show, the raid, they keep saying the raid's 15 men, but in the book, it's 20 men. So that's different. Right. They spent 2 days just outside Haguenau, behind the lines, obviously practicing with the boats, these rubber boats, which they don't show us or tell us anything about. McClung is apparently half Indian and can, quote, smell krauts. they didn't tell us that. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, Eugene Jackson is the one that sort of gets it, isn't he? Yeah.
His death in the book and a couple of the others is actually quite harrowing. If you recall, I mean, it's a very, very harrowing death.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't get to see that. But anyone who hasn't read any of the books that talk about Haguenau and Jackson's death, it's an appalling situation.
Well, here's the line. Private Jackson, who had been wounded on the patrol, began screaming, kill me, somebody kill me. I can't stand it. Christ, I can't stand it. Kill me. For God's sake, kill me. His face was covered with blood from a grenade fragment that had pierced his skull and lodged in his brain. So, yeah, it's even more harrowing than they put in the TV show, which is pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
Here's a line from Webster. He said, quote, we saw a sheet of flame, then a red ball. This is just talking about general artillery exchanges in Haguenau. He said, we saw a sheet of flame, then a red ball shoot into the basement of a dwelling across the creek. The artillery shells flashed orange on the road, on the German road and strong points. Half a mile away, our direct front, a house started to burn. Okay, sorry, that's a bit weird.
I'll be a typo in the book you spotted.
Yeah. D Company's 50 caliber opened up behind us in a steady bark. A solid stream of tracers shot up the creek, providing a duel with a German burp gun, which hosed us with a steadier stream of tracers back at D Company from the protection of an undamaged cellar. It talks a fair bit about neither side, which it says in the show, neither side are really doing any full frontal attacks or trying to do much, but they are still exchanging artillery and machine gun fire and sniper fire and mortar fire still all the time. The guy that goes mad when Jackson is back at being worked on and dying, there's a guy called Vest, Private Alan Vest, which hasn't come up in the book yet, and I'm not sure if he was mentioned in the show at any point. But so a new thing. A line on the 2 Germans that they captured, and this is what Webster says about the 2 Germans that they captured and brought back with them. Webster says they, quote, were a pair of very self-possessed non-coms, a buck sergeant, I don't know what a buck sergeant is, and a staff sergeant. They stood calm, like rocks, in a hot, smelly room full of men who wanted to kill them, and they never moved a finger or twisted their expressions. They were the most poised individuals I've ever seen. That's a remarkable thing, isn't it?
Yeah. In a situation like that, I mean, how on earth could they remain so composed? But there's another thing that doesn't really get explored too much in the episode is with the German. Apparently, where he keeps yelling, keeps crying, yelling out and everything. They're constantly tossing grenades at him to try and kill him. And I think there's about 3 or 4 grenades that are tossed at him, and he's still alive. And they're like, "What? What on earth? This guy's still alive and kicking, he's still screaming. We've got to kill him."
So, just a point of information: Private Vest that's him. That's Private Vest in the show, played by Kieran O'Brien, who I actually also met him not long after he did this. He was doing a play at the National, and I asked him what he'd done, and he said he'd just come off Band of Brothers, which hadn't been released then.
Right.
I think he's originally from Liverpool, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, just to build on what Inside Man said there. Yeah, I'll read that. A couple of bits there. It's surprising because they mention it in the show that there's a guy, the wounded German, they couldn't get back. and they leave him, and they just mention that he's in misery. Should we put him out of his misery? And I think it's Dexter Fletcher says, "Fuck his misery." Well, in the book, it's remarkable that Webster himself couldn't put up with it. He said, "I pitied him, dying all alone in a country far from home, dying slowly without hope or love on the bank of a dirty on the bank of a dirty little river, helpless." And that he, Webster and Marsh, threw grenades at him. One landed right near him, went off, but he didn't die. He just kept screaming. And then someone else did it again, and that didn't work. And they gave up. But then, like the next day, he's still there, sort of wheezing. It's described as wheezing. The wheezing continued. And so they went and they did it again, and they finally he was finally killed. So they tried 3 times to put this dude out of his misery, and that finally did. But Webster here, a very short paragraph on the death of that Jackson. He said, and some of this is directly quoted as the voiceover, the narration in the episode. And he says this: "He wasn't 20 years old. He hadn't begun to live. Shrieking and moaning, he gave up his life on a stretcher. Back in America, the standard of living continued to rise. Back in America, the racetracks were booming. The nightclubs were making their greatest profits in history. Miami Beach was so crowded you couldn't get a room anywhere. Few people seemed to care. Hell, there was a boom. This was prosperity. This was the way to fight a war. We read of black market restaurants, of manufacturers' plea for gradual reconversion to peacetime goods." What's that noise?
I don't know. I thought it was Inside Man, but I muted him and it wasn't.
No, it's not me.
Okay. A reversion.
It might be me plugging my charger in. Sorry about that.
A reversion to peacetime goods beginning immediately. And we wondered if the people would ever know what it cost the soldiers in terror, bloodshed, and hideous, agonizing deaths to win the war, which is a very real, it's a very, very real thing to say, isn't it? I mean, it's really getting to it there. So a couple more things to say. Oh, the thing where Cobb is drunk. Giving it a bit of mouth. Well, that incident was so much bigger in real life.
He assaulted someone, didn't he? One of his officers.
Yeah, it's a college boy.
Tell us more history, bro.
Yeah, well, so him and Wiseman, another guy called Wiseman, Cobb and Wiseman, find a bunch of booze, a bunch of schnapps, right? And they nick 2 bottles each and just down them. 2 bottles of schnapps, is loads, obviously. And they say that quite often when a soldier finds any booze, you drink it all. That's sort of the unspoken rule. You drink it all. So Wiseman, Cobb, he comes back so drunk that he gets in a fight with Lieutenant Foley. He charged Foley, and Sergeant Martin, who is Dexter Fletcher, had to pull his 45 on him. He had to actually pull his 45 because Foley had started tuning him out for, quote, being off limit, disobeying orders, being drunk and disorderly, and so on. And Martin had to pull his 45 on him, and a couple of dudes had to sort of beat Cobb down because he was going berserk, basically. And anyway, Cobb got court-martialed for that. He was actually court-martialed.
Wow.
Was he kicked out?
Yeah.
That would mean
because
they
went to Sync. They wrote up the court-martial papers, and they took it to Sync and sort of would let Sync decide whether he's actually going to court-martial him or not. And Sync was like, yeah. Apparently, Sync said to Foley, you could have saved us all a lot of trouble and you could have shot him.
Right.
And Wiseman also got court-martialed. So a couple of last things before I sort of finish off here. Lipton got a couple of small bits of shrapnel in here. And they don't show you any of that in this episode. He got a tiny bit of shrapnel in his neck at this point. And it wasn't even enough for him to go off the line, but he had a little bit of metal in his neck, which wasn't removed for 34 years, i.e. until he was an old man. And it started to give him a bit of jip as an old man, and he had to have it surgically removed at that point. And also Lipton said about his battlefield commission, becoming an officer and a gentleman. He said, "I've always felt that the Battlefield Commission was the greatest honor that I have ever had." And then quickly to say about Winters deciding to disobey the order to do a second raid.
Yeah.
Ambrose tells us it started to snow over that night. Between those 2 days, it had snowed. And, quote, "The snow was frozen on top, crunchy, noisy, the air cold and clear, and the sky was clear so that the moon was shining. Winters thought a patrol under such circumstances was suicidal, so he decided to disobey orders." And then I suppose one last thing to say is just a note from another historian, who Ambrose quotes, a historian called Glenn Gray. And he wrote about the reality of soldiers that are actually on the cutting edge or on the very front line. There's a long, storied history of disobeying orders when you think they're just insane.
Yeah.
And he says this. So this is the words of historian Glenn Gray, who wrote, to be required to carry out orders in which he does not believe, i.e. an officer actually on the front line, in which he does not believe, given by men who are frequently far removed from the realities with which the orders deal, is the familiar lot of combat soldiers. It is a great boon of frontline positions that disobedience is frequently possible, since supervision is not very exact where danger of death is present. Many a conscientious soldier has discovered he could reinterpret military orders in his own spirit before obeying them. I don't know if you've ever seen, actually, I know a lot of you have, the All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
And the idea that
all of the different versions of it.
Right. And, order to do a trench raid, i.e. an extremely dangerous thing where guys are almost certainly going to die, maybe all get killed. And it's because some colonel or some general way behind the lines over dinner the evening before, it just sort of says, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll order a raid. Yeah, we'll do whatever. And the reality is, well, no, me and all my buddies are going to get killed here. So how about we just lie and said we did it? It's not rare, right? It's not a rare thing. And one last little thing to say about Shifty Powers, which they don't say anything about this in the episode, is that Shifty Powers apparently had his M1 Garand that he'd had the whole time. And he said, I was a good shot. I was a very good shot. I'd hunted my whole life. But that particular M1 was just brilliant. He says it's the best rifle he ever had. He said he could just point it at anything and it hit dead center every time. A bit like the way sometimes you get a close relationship with a gun, with a certain rifle sometimes. A bit like how a snooker player gets a very, very close relationship with a particular cue or a particular tip of a cue, and they become one. And he says just after Hagenau, they made him have a brand new M1 because his old M1 was a bit battered, and they made him take a brand new M1. And he said after that he couldn't hit anything. He said, he just said the new M1 he got was just crap. He said it was the awfulest shoot he ever was with it, and that's not I'm not mispronouncing that. The awfulest shoot. Okay, and the last thing to say, a line from Winters. Winters said this: "We did after Hagenau. We didn't realize it yet, but we all started walking with more care, with eyes in the back of our heads, making sure we didn't get knocked off. After Hagenau," he explained, "you suddenly had a gut feeling, by God, I believe I'm going to make it." So there you go.
Yeah, I think what's quite evident about this episode is that you can see that after the kind of massive sort of adrenaline that they've had sort of pumping around their veins through Bastogne and Foy, that this is the moment where the adrenaline is starting to dissipate. It's starting to wear off a little bit, and they're kind of looking a little bit more weary, and they are looking a lot more cautious. Not just because it's been openly illustrated by Winters defying the orders for the second mission, but there is a kind of a weariness to this episode. You can see how it's got to them. And Lance, I think when you mentioned about the field shower, I think it was quite appropriate to have had that in this episode as well, to show that there was not exactly comforts, but there was something to sort of wash away what had previously been there, if you like, and they were starting to sort of settle a little bit more. But it's quite I find quite a tiring episode, because there is a kind of a weariness to it. You do feel their weariness, in this, and
yeah, a lot of that is played through Malarkey's character. You can see how jaded he is with the war.
Jaded. Yeah, good word. Yeah,
everyone is kind of knackered, and and I think the death of Jackson sort of underscores the pointlessness of anyone dying at this stage.
Yeah.
One point, Malarkey, 5 of his best buddies have died now at Bastow.
Yeah.
So Malarkey's sort of a forlorn figure. One quick note about those showers. They were told they would be hot showers, and although they weren't freezing, apparently they weren't that hot. Everyone loved it, and they'll take it. And of course, it's better than nothing, of course. But they weren't actually hot.
Better than a cold one, isn't it? That's
they're a bit on the tepid side.
I will just quickly add that when we come to the behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff, I've got a shower story. I do have a shower story.
Great. Of course, there's got to be one. This is the town of Hagenau. This is the old sort of medieval river that, in one section of it, flows around it like almost like a moat.
One thing I've said, that there's a river and there's a canal in Hagenau. So I don't know if that's the canal or not, but
it's difficult to tell. This is the same stretch of water, but I imagine that at the time we're talking about, the water was probably up to here. So because if the river burst its banks, then the canal would have done the same. And then you imagine how deep this would have been if you'd fallen in and you'd gone under. You're not going to be able to break up to the surface again unless you're a really good swimmer. Now, if you look at these buildings here, these ones here, these were all there in 45, and so were a couple of these. Not these one, not this modern stuff here, obviously. And if we have a look here you go. So that's 45 at the top, and more recent.
It's amazing, isn't it? I love pictures. I love that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the
Absolutely
same.
Amazing.
That's the same building above there, caught in the background between these two. You can see they've put a few tiles back on the bottom. And so that, I mean, this is, I don't know if that's easy company, but certainly this would have been taken around that time. Look how much snow there is. So you can really see how cold it would have been. So a fairly, from a historical point of view, quite an accurate episode. Then I don't think there's any major. There's some little bits taken out, like Cobb's thing was bigger than they showed it. They could have might have actually been quite interesting to see him go full drunk and have the gun pulled on him. But I can tell you why they didn't do that. They didn't do that because of what's coming up in episode. I think is it episode 9 when the guy gets drunk and he shoots one of the 10. Men in the head.
10. It's 10.
That's why
it's just after the war's ended, doesn't it? After the war's ended.
That's why. Well, that guy's only just arrived. He's a replacement, and he nearly kills one of Easy Company. Nearly kills one of the veterans. And basically, if they had that in this episode, something similar with pistols being drawn when a man was inebriated, it would have taken the power out of that scene because we've already seen it happen once before. So that's why they didn't include it.
One last thing I'd like to say about Jones.
Yep.
Lieutenant Jones. They mentioned that he's sort of fresh out of West Point. And they sort of hint at this, what I'm about to say, but don't really go into much detail. That West Pointers, it's like going to Sandhurst. It's like it's the best of the best. Not only are you probably going to have a lifelong career in the armed services, but you will be sort of fast tracked as long as you play
Yeah.
the cards right. So that Jones, not only was he a West Pointer, but he was also in the same. They mentioned, oh, that's where Eisenhower went. Yeah, of course, Eisenhower was a West Pointer. They're talking about Dwight D. Eisenhower, but Eisenhower's son, John Eisenhower, passed out at the same time as that Jones.
Yeah, that they were in the same class together, I thought.
Yeah, and there was this thing, I can't remember the exact name of it. It's something like the West Point Association, something or other. Like an inner sanctum of West Pointers, where like the Skull and Bones Society at Yale or something.
Yeah.
And they all had these rings, which meant you were in it. Anyway, this Jones was in that. So this Lieutenant Jones was sort of a golden boy sort of a thing. He's been sort of handpicked to be the best of the best. And anyway, they wanted him to have some combat experience. And so after he goes on this raid, as they show you in the episode, they immediately promote him to first lieutenant. And in the book, we're told that he's then taken off the front and put behind in like Division HQ or something, where he's be completely safe. So you can just tick off that he's actually seen combat. Yeah. And so yeah. Anyway, this Lieutenant Jones is sort of at the inner sanctum of being a junior officer,
right?
Which they sort of hint at a little bit, but in the book it goes into way more detail about it.
Do we know what the rest of his military career consisted of?
I don't actually. I haven't looked it up, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Do you want to have a quick Google of that while I go into the cast bit? Just that.
What's the full name again? Then I'll look it up.
Curious to know. Well, if
Jones, Lieutenant Jones. What's his first
Lieutenant
name?
Jones, Easy
Henry
Company.
Jones, Henry S. Jones.
Hang on, I'll tell you his first name because it will be on the cast list because they're Lieutenant Henry Jones.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's thank you so much for that history, bro. We'll probably come back and pick up on a couple of history things as we go. But let's focus on this aspect. There are really, I would say, there are 4 characters that this episode focuses on. You have the main character's perspective, which is really Webster, coming back to the company, yet finding himself estranged. It's a bit like he's, decided to go back to an ex-girlfriend, but the relationship's not the same. And, something no one should ever do under any circumstances.
Yeah, it's not a good idea.
No. Then you have Lieutenant Jones, who, it's quite good the way they put him and Webster together because they're in one level they're worlds apart in terms of people and experience and all the rest of it. But there's one way in which they're equal, which is they're both having to earn the company's respect and trust again from day one, even though Webster's been with them since Camp Mosquitoes way back in the day, Toccoa. So then you also have Private Eugene Jackson. It's a minor role, but we do get quite a bit of screen time with him, rightly so, because that way when he gets killed, spoiler alert, sorry, you feel it. I would have preferred him to have been in the episode previous to this.
Yeah, agree.
I think if we had got invested in him even a bit more, if he'd been one of the actors, I don't understand why they just didn't make him another character who was in the show all the way through, like Skip and Muck. It was a bit like, I remember when I watched B.O.B. the first and second time, both times I was like, hang on, was this guy in any other episodes? No, he's not. So we get a fair bit of time with him, just enough to make us feel his death, but not as much as we could have had. So if I've got a criticism of the episode, it's probably that. But yeah, so it's very much their narratives. And then I would say the 4th character who gets a fair bit of screen time and we see more of his arc is Malarkey, who, very dejected. This is a different person, even from the Malarkey we saw at Bastogne. I think of all the arcs in the show, I think his is probably the best and most well drawn out, and that's very much a credit to Scott Grimes. But he also he's given adequate dialogue and screen time to present that narrative to the audience across the entire 10 episodes. Not all of the actors get that chance, and I'm sure all of them were capable, because even though this is probably, if I had to pick a least favorite episode of the series, it's probably this one. And to say that about an episode of Band of Brothers is still like sort of choosing between that fantastic looking gold watch or that one with some extra diamonds encrusted on it. They're both still amazing watches that look good, you know. So it's not a criticism. It's just I think this episode hits you emotionally the way that it's intended to. You feel exhausted, you feel downbeat.
It's also like a kind of full of storm as well. I can't and the danger's always there, even when you're relaxing or taking a breather from all the chaos.
There's very much a subdued feeling. Now, the actor on the right is Nolan Hemmings, who is the son of the late great David Hemmings, who many people will remember from the film Gladiator. He's like the sort of arena announcer.
Cassius, I think it's Cassius, isn't it?
Cassius, and with his wonderful voice, and he also played the prison governor in Mean Machine. So two great roles to check out. But this is his son. You can really see, if you've seen pictures of David Hemmings in his 20s, he looks exactly like this. Anyway, I wrote to Nolan yesterday, and he's agreed to come on the channel. So I'm hoping we'll get him on for either episode 9 or episode 10, but it may be that he comes on at another time entirely. But he said he was very happy to come on.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He has got the link for tonight, as has Andrew Lee Potts, who plays Eugene Jackson, who's already on my friends list on Facebook. We know each other. He hasn't agreed to come on yet. I just wrote him a message. I forgot he was on my friends list, and I was like, mate, we're talking about your episode tonight. Do you want to come on? Here's a link. So it could well be that he has other plans, but all the actors, including the guest actors in this episode, are great. But this really, though, is there's Phil Baranti, by the way, who's he's a film director now, and a very, very good one. He directed Boiling Point with Stephen Graham. There's a whole load of people from Band of Brothers connected to that film. But I mean, this really, though, is David Webster, aka Eon Bailey's episode on the left here.
Yeah.
I really like this actor. Can't praise him enough. I think he's really
interesting. Interesting thing about Webster was that I mean, there was a brilliant book that he wrote. Just superb book. No, sorry, it wasn't. I think it was a series of letters and memoirs and what have you.
Yeah.
And shortly after it was published, somebody in Devon was going through their attic, and they happened to find his actual diary.
Wow!
His
diary. He died before it even got published, though. Sadly.
Yeah, and it's the diary. The diary was found just after the book was published. The book on David Webster was published. So you know, all handwritten notes and everything, and it's predominantly the stuff from the States to Koa, leading right up to D-Day. So it ends just prior to D-Day. But yeah, whether hopefully that's going to be published sometime soon.
Well, just say Webster was a writer. I mean, he did literature, and he went on to be a writer. And the excerpts that are in Ambrose's book are clearly superior to the rest. He's obviously got literary talent, but it's quite a sad ending. He disappeared out at sea in the end.
That's right.
Keep that. Go back to that still. Keep that up, please. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, guys.
Well, I was just saying the final Webster sailed out to sea one day in the early 60s and was never seen again, which is, quite an odd.
I believe he was writing a book about sharks, wasn't he? I believe.
Yeah.
And his boot was found on the set of Jaws, and that's all we know. No, that's untrue. But he was writing a book about sharks, and he may well have got too close to one. Didn't he go out on a canoe? He went out onto the ocean in a canoe.
Was it? Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know the detail of that.
I that's what I read. I read it was a canoe somewhere, but I might be wrong about that. Yeah. Don't go looking for sharks with a tiny canoe in the ocean. General. He is great in the film. Want to mention the actor who plays Cobb. Never liked Cobb. Always seemed like an arsehole.
Yeah, it's well done. That's well done, right? He's supposed to be, and they wrote it and acted that very well.
Yeah,
I got the same thing.
Just having a go. You see in the previous episodes, he's just having a go at James McAvoy, but some.
He's played by Craig Heaney, who I believe has stopped acting now, which is a shame because he's great. But he's got that kind of, like, if you're going on a coach trip somewhere that you've signed up for, and this guy sits next to you on that coach trip, he's got the face of someone that you're going to think, this guy's going to moan the whole way. He's got that look, and I think that's what they must have been like, actors coming in the room, reading for a part. We need someone who looks like they're going to fucking whinge a lot and get pissed.
But isn't it a great shame isn't it a great shame that so many of these actors have stopped acting, that they have kind of given up and moved on to something else? Because I cannot fault a single actor in this show.
No,
not just this episode, but the entire series. I think they're, some of them have gone on to incredibly big things, and others have kind of remained jobbing actors. Others, as you say, have now become directors and producers and writers. But for those that have given up the profession, it's such a shame. It's such an incredible shame, because there were some really, really fine actors among this bunch.
Yeah, I think Cobb, the actor who plays Cobb, does a very good job, because he's supposed to be obnoxious.
No, absolutely,
and he is. I feel like he's the type of GI that would go home and beat his wife and kids. Be a mean drunk, right?
Get the belt out.
And I hope, I don't know what happened to the real Cobb later in life, so I don't mean to slander him unnecessarily, but that's the impression he's given. It's written well and it was acted very well, I think.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the casting of Colin Hanks, because I feel like in the audition room he may have had an advantage, possibly, as I believe he knew someone who worked on the production.
Apparently the other cast members weren't happy about him as well. They actually thought it was nepotism, but I don't know if this was true, but did he actually win him round because his acting was so good, and they thought, all right, he's actually good, he's not there because he's Tom Hanks' son.
I've heard various stories about this. Fortunately, that's why we have the inside man here. Step in, please.
I've heard nothing about it. Seriously,
was he liked? Was he liked or not liked? You must have heard if he was liked.
I believe he was. I mean, I never got close enough to him when he was sort of around, but it appears that it was very
man
much
that kept people like 20 meters away.
You can't look him in the eye.
Yeah,
Tom Cruise. But I don't think I could take anything away from his acting. I mean, he is a very good actor, and he plays the part very, very well. But I never heard anything. I never heard any kind of whispers or rumblings or anything like that about nepotism or whether anybody was displeased or dissatisfied with him being on the set.
I must say, obviously he got the role because he's Tom Hanks' son. Obviously, right? But his acting is up to snuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Very much so.
There's nothing I can't fault him. He does a good job. So that's all that matters, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think not only did he do a good job, because he really holds it in, and I mean, he could have played this role very differently, but he really holds it in. He underplays everything. Clearly, Dad probably gave him some pointers in that department, but he pitches it perfectly in terms of sort of not playing him like he's out of his depth. He's playing him that he's in an uncomfortable situation, but nevertheless, he's going to be an officer. He's going to keep that distance between him and the men, as some officers do. But he's also going to try and be as competent as possible and get the most out of the experience as possible. I mean, he's determined to go on that patrol. He asks three times.
And the funny thing is, if you kind of want to sort of examine it a little bit deeper, and you examine the situation with Jones as a character, and try to put a demarcation line between the Jones situation and the Colin Hanks situation, there are parallels there. There are parallels. So you have somebody who would be considered privileged, that is going into a group of men that are already established. So was he cast purely because of that? Because of that situation? Because there is a parallel between his real life situation and his relationship, obviously, with his father, and and having the privilege of being able to put himself forward to his dad, and say, I would like to be in this. Or did his dad actually say, do you know what, right, you could actually really slot in, because people will see this as being nepotism. People will see this as being, you have the privilege of not really being able to, not having to sort of cast for this. So the same way that Jones had the privilege of not and I suppose it is a privilege of not going through the situations that the rest of Easy Company went through.
Was he on the boot camp?
I don't think he was. I don't think he was on the boot camp.
Right.
One thing I'd say, just in general, about nepotism is that the world goes round on nepotism.
Yeah.
If I could tell my 16, 18-year-old self, it is who you know.
Yeah.
It really is. The whole world goes round on that. So to ever think that the world's going to be free of nepotism and that everything happens on merit, of course not. Right.
No.
So, but what really matters is, can you do the job or not? And as I said, I think he did a good job acting. So there's examples of, like, a classic example, in my opinion anyway, is Sofia Coppola on Godfather 3. Terrible actress. She ruins that film. She's terrible. She's terrible and ruins that film. Absolutely ruins it, for me anyway.
Yeah, I've seen trees that are direct. I've seen trees that are less wooden than her.
Yeah, she's the pits, honestly. Laughable.
Her relationship with her Sonny's son was probably the worst bit in that bloody film. It lets the film down as a whole.
Yeah.
But then again, that's how the world goes. I thought of an example where Nico Rosberg got an F1 seat because of his dad, Kike, but he was world champion, and you don't win a season of Formula One unless you can really, really do it. But then you look at Lance Stroll; he's only in F1 because of his dad, and he's crap. He can barely keep the thing on the road. So if you can do the thing, I sort of don't mind, right? Yeah. And so in my opinion, he does a good job in the role. He acts well, so it's fair enough. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, cool. Anyone else want to say anything about Mr. Hanks, Colin?
No, he's very good. Despite the fact that he's the son of a really big Hollywood star, he is very very understated. He is very understated.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there. I didn't mean to speak over.
No.
I've done it a few times. It's okay.
No. It's all good. So in terms of Inside Man, in terms of the bits of this episode where you got to act and be in it, which bits are we talking about?
It was pretty much everything in Hagenau, apart from the boat situation. I was in the shower. Do you want me to tell the shower story?
Yes, let's hear that now.
Okay.
Well, donuts involved in this one as well.
well, what happened was, so I got a call. I just I just finished doing a I was on a
Hell,
Friday. So
Di wants to see you in the showers.
Yeah. So
No?
I was on my way. I was on my way home, and I got a call from the agent saying, look, can you come in tomorrow? Um, so shooting all Saturday. Oh God, yeah, okay then, yeah. And they said, oh, you don't mind being naked, do you? And I said, well, what? Did there possibly some nudity involved? Oh, right. Okay. I said, no, I'm fine with that. So anyway, we got there, shower scene and everything, everyone with their towels around them and what have you. And of course, shooting it, we had the makeup girls coming in and, just sort of daubing a little bit of, grime on us and that. And then we had to shower it off and all that kind of stuff. And one of the fellas who had his towel wrapped around his waist, he was, people were a bit, like I say, being daubed with kind of fake muck and what have you. So this girl's kind of knelt down to her makeup box. And unfortunately, the chap that she was standing in front of got a little bit evidently excited. So as she looked up, she was poked in the eye. Yeah. So somebody poked her in the eye, but not with his finger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You get to hear about it all on this channel.
I feel like that must have been deliberate. Like you can very easily avoid that if you wanted to, right? Oh, sorry, love. Oh no. I didn't see you there.
I was going to say deliberate from who? The guy or the girl?
Yeah, there were quite a few of us there, and some of the other fellows that were there, I'm sure that they'll be watching this at some point or other, whether they're watching it now or watching it at a later date, that will remember, and hopefully they'll stick in a little comment there and tell me how much they. Hopefully, even the fellow who accidentally did that might be watching. So
might pop up, so to speak.
Might pop up.
Yeah. I've just created a poll in the chat. So, asking which of these 4 choices of actors / characters stands out the most for you in this episode. It's not an easy choice, actually, but do click on your choices, including the panel, please. So Winters and Nixon are barely in this episode, which I think is good because this is very much about the frontline patrol doing frontline stuff, and they're in Battalion CP now, really, aren't they? So Kieran O'Brien, I believe we've seen him in a previous episode to this. Do remember seeing his face, I think, in at least one other episode. Actually, we can check that because it will say on his IMDb. I'll look that up in just a second. Did we find out what happened to Cobb or Jones after the war? Quite curious to know these things. Going to talk about the set in just a second, but boy, does it look good. So how deep was this trench of water, by the way?
I don't think it was particularly deep. I mean, I would probably say 6 foot, maybe a little bit deeper.
Yeah, because it's the same concrete basin that they used for the river for Saving Private Ryan, wasn't it? Because it was still there.
That's right. Yeah.
So they just refilled it up and got the hose out. Got the garden hose out.
Yeah, got the watering cans out.
Yeah, filled it up. So does anybody else want to give any of the other cast members a mention in this episode? I mean, I always find it interesting to see who gets screen time, even people that don't get much dialogue. Oh, okay, there's another shot of them. Again, I noticed, Michael Fassbender playing, Christensen. He's in it a lot in terms of like shots.
Yeah.
Here's Smock Dreamer in the chat. Thanks for commenting, buddy. And I've not seen you in the chat before, so welcome to the channel. After the war, Jones was not discharged and remained in Germany, where he was promoted to the rank of captain, 790th CIC detachment. He never returned to the States. He died after an operation following an automobile accident in Berlin while stationed there on 21st of July, 47. Yeah.
I'll tell you what's remarkable, the number of accidents, particularly road accidents.
Yeah.
Obviously, famously, even George Patton.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and they say, you know, Shifty on his way home was in some sort of terrible road accident. It happens loads, and not just World War II, loads of times. I've heard lots of examples, you know, be some random thing like Gulf War II, and there's just 2 Jeeps crash into each other and 6 guys die. It's like, it just happens. It's remarkable, really, how often it happens in war zones. There's loads of accidents, particularly road accidents.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, men high on adrenaline, that kind of thing.
You know, the bit in A Bridge Too Far when one of the brigadiers nearly shoots Sean Connery in the foot. You know, like loads of friendly fire. Just loads of accidents. It's mad.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Well, no. Yeah, friendly fire, very common indeed. This is a interesting thing about Hagenau as well. It doesn't really come under this section, but I'll show you it now. That I just found. Just gonna take that down for a sec. This is a fortified casemate that was one part of the town of Hagenau. Is now I guess it might be. It doesn't look like it's a museum, but it's some sort of memorial or whatever. Pretty cool though. Now this must have been because Hagenau is in France. It's not in Germany. It's in France, near the German border, right?
Alsace, yeah.
Alsace.
Alsace, yeah. And that's a French design of turret that they would often have on their fortifications. So I'm wondering if this was a French one that was taken over by the Germans, or if it was possibly built later using French stuff, which is why you've got that's a French tank turret, I believe. Because the Germans would often do that. They would take turrets off of tanks and use them on land fortifications. Just recannibalize everything. They were very good at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, look at what they did with all the armament and everything in North Africa. I mean, literally everything they captured was just, you know, painted up with the Africa Corps insignia, and you know, everything was repurposed. Everything was repurposed.
One thing to say about Alsace is that it's one of those regions where there's just been loads of war over the centuries. There's been lots and lots of war in the Alsace region, going back to Charlemagne, going back to Attila, going back to ancient times. In the War of 1870-71, World War I raged through the Alsace region.
Yeah, Alsace and Lorraine, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the fact that a lot of stuff went down in World War II is no surprise.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. Does anyone have anything else they want to say about the cast? If you haven't taken part in the poll, those people in chat and also my guests, please do so. I mean, there's quite a lot of the cast in this episode. You know, some of the characters that have got more screen time elsewhere have a lot less here. But we Paul Randleman's in the episode. Sergeant Martin, George Lutz, Malarkey, of course, we've talked about before. Babe Heffron is there. Piconte, you know. So Liebgott's there. It's one of the episodes where it feels like most of the people that have survived the war, who we've met earlier, all get a bit of screen time or get a line or two in this episode. You know, Eugene Rowe is there, Garcia's there, Spears, of course, Harry Welsh briefly, Shifty Powers. On the subject of Shifty Powers, actually, I proper rate Peter Youngblood Hills, who played him, and he's got a brilliant scene in episode 10 that the last time I watched the series brought me to tears. And I wrote to him, and actually, you know what, if I can find the correspondence I had with him, I'll read it out to you guys. But he's another actor that I feel I'd like to see more of, and I don't feel like we're seeing enough of him.
Yeah.
You know, he should not be playing military police in The Railway Children Return. He should be like a major, you know, he should be a
I think
major actor.
he's an amazing actor.
Yeah, I could not agree more. What's wrong with these casting directors, man? You know,
Absolutely no idea.
like, I mean, yeah, he's got just a brilliant speech. But yeah, I'll have a quick look for that speech. Do you want to, Inside Man, you want to say anything else about the cast in this episode, or just what it was like filming it with you and the guys?
Yeah, it was. I mean, in terms of the cast, absolutely faultless. You know, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, whenever
when did this shoot in the schedule? What time of year?
This was November.
Oh right, so it was as cold as it looked then.
It was, yeah, it was cold, yeah, and I think there's a couple of those pictures are actually taken on the very final day. In fact, one of them is actually just prior to the final shot of the episode, and that was the complete wrap of the entire series. It was November 23rd, 2000, and it was it was absolutely freezing. You know, so everyone was soaking. You know, we were handed out these kind of plastic military ponchos, sort of Eastern European military ponchos, just to keep us a little bit dry. You know, we would get into the trucks for a little bit of shelter, or maybe inside some of the buildings, inside some of the sets, maybe for a little bit of shelter. But it was wet, it was miserable, it was cold, but do you know what? We loved it. We loved every second of it. In terms of the cast, I mean, I don't know. I think there's something about Dexter Fletcher that he's whenever he's in a scene, whenever he's in anything, I don't know. I'm just quite drawn to watching him. I think he's a compelling actor. He's a fantastic actor.
Yeah,
and
he gets some good moments in this episode.
Yeah. I think this
very
is
underrated as well as an actor, that Dexter Fletcher. He is.
Well, he's a director and a producer now. He produced The Offer, the making of the Godfather drama series, which, by the way, we definitely have to do this sort of thing for that show.
Oh my God, yeah.
As it's history, obviously we'll get History Bro back for that because it's history.
We do a deep dive on Press Gang.
I think not. I think not. The Offer is an outstanding. I mean, that's like an 8-part miniseries. It's absolutely. If you haven't seen it, History Bro, definitely watch it. You will like it. It is really good, and it's the attention to period detail on it is amazing, and the again, first class acting. This is incredible because this is like. I guess we're getting into production stuff, so maybe I should hang fire. Anything else about the actors before we change gears? Anyone?
No, I was about to say Dexter Fletcher as well because I don't think he gets mentioned a lot about, especially in this show. And he shows to be a pretty good chameleon. You know, he can be very funny, and this time he shows he can be a very good authority. A commanding presence as well when he needs to be.
There was a push to get him cast as Doctor Who at one point, and I actually think he would have made a really good Doctor.
Yeah, I'd have bought him as that.
I would have bought that.
I mean, he'd even make a good Doctor Who now. He's just got this wild sort of unruly hair that goes everywhere. But yeah, you know, he's an incredibly gifted guy, and I sort of know him by proxy, really, through because I wasn't at Anna Shares when he was there. He was before me. But of course, because I'm best mates with Jason Fleming, they are best mates. So the first time I properly met him was at the Wild Bill premiere, which was right after his dad passed away. And I went to go up to him to say, "Oh, Dexter, I just wanted to say, I know your father would be really proud of you today." And he just went straight away, "Oh, Lance, thanks so much for coming." Oh, and he just like knew everything about me. He knew exactly who I was and treated me like he'd known me all my life. You know, that was it. We were off to the races kind of thing.
It's funny you mentioned Wild Bill actually, because
yeah,
my son one of my sons actually had acting lessons with Dexter, and he was kind of covertly casting for Wild Bill at the time.
right.
So so you had all these young lads that were there that didn't kind of realize that they were sort of being really observed by Dexter, but yeah, my son really took to him. Yeah, really liked
Yeah,
him.
no, he's a good guy. He's had a very eventful life, but I think it's because of that he's turned into the
Mm.
the lovely guy he is, and
Mm.
he's not typical of the higher echelons of the industry who are very aloof. He's far removed from that.
I mean,
All
this
right.
is somebody he's grafted all of his life.
Oh, absolutely. And Band of Brothers revitalized his career, by the way, because his acting career was right just prior to being cast in this. It was kind of almost over, and he wasn't getting cast in anything anymore. And I think people felt he'd got too much exposure when he was younger. And this role was so different for him. It really showed his versatility,
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Well, don't forget you can still click on that poll. Dexter's not one of the choices because I focused on the people who got the most screen time. Do click on it. All right, let's move on and talk about this aspect of this.
Tonight, we're gonna have to cross the river.
These crowds are gonna catch some hell.
Well, I mean, again, props to the late great Alan Tomkins and production designer Anthony Pratt. This town, the reconstruction of which is a rebuild of, was it the Carentan set? Was it a rebuild of? It's incredible.
Carentan set, yeah, it was it was Carentan sort of repurposed.
Yeah, repurposed. Yeah, I mean, and you can see the mud on the floor. It's good that this was shot in November because you've got that. This must have been one of the warmer days, but you've got that very winter feel. I take it they had snow machines in action again.
There was a bit of snow kind of going around. That shot, that's actually on the very last day. That's just prepping for the very final shot. If you look at the last shot of the episode, and you have a group of guys, right? So everyone's kind of lined up along the side of the road. So everyone's standing in their positions, just waiting to get the nod from the AD, and then they start marching. Basically a march down the road, and then there's an explosion. Everyone ducks to the side. There's an incoming shell, so everyone kind of runs off the road, and the camera cranes up and pulls back. And this was just prior to the very, very last shot of on the very last day of shooting.
Right. Interesting tidbit on Cobb here. Due to his role in Band of Brothers, his interests and personal life became focused on the recovery from war, which led to a 12-year mentorship with Vietnam veteran Sensei and Interfaith Rev.
How interesting.
Almost felt like Steven Seagal was about to appear on the rest of that text. Here's the name of the person. I didn't see that. Clifford Shaggy, I think you pronounce that. Blue, could you cue up the last sequence, the last sort of 60 seconds of this episode?
Yeah, Bob.
Gonna have a look at this. One of the things I really like about this episode is the last shot, and I'm sure you'll remember it, Inside Man. But part of this set that's very prominent is there's an arch that's like it's like the old sort of medieval towns. You often enter them via an arch. There's kind of like an arched gateway.
Yeah.
And the Rhine is actually, the Rhine River is just beyond Hagenau. It's not that much further past the town. So you've got the river that runs through Hagenau itself, and then you've got the Rhine. Now, there's a board game called Beyond the Rhine, and as soon as I saw the cover for that board game, I was like, that's that arch from Band of Brothers. and I'll show you exactly what I mean. It's amazing the tidbits of information you'll pick up on this stream. There you go. This is it's like the entire campaign of 1944 going into 1945 Western Front. I've seen people play this game over a whole week. And it's one of those games where
a board game. Sorry,
it's a board game. It's a board
right.
game.
Okay.
You can see how much it covers. So it covers, the map right up to. So this covers all the battles of Market Garden Bulge, and all the stuff that Remagen, basically getting into Germany. And I think it's the scale of it is something like either brigades or regiments. I forget which. But it's a huge game, and I've seen people. You can see all the counters on the map here in play. I've seen people play this all week. I go to this games convention in Arizona where it's called MonsterCon, and it's called that because people play monster games with monster maps. Huge games. And I'll see people playing this, and I'll come back at the end of the week, and it feels like the counters have only moved about 3 hexes on the whole line, but they seem to be enjoying themselves. I like my games to go a bit faster than that. I mean, I'd love to have a room and have this set up in it for months and play it over a period of time. Or it would be great if they did a computerized version of this campaign, because I would definitely play that. But yeah, so the cover of this game, I felt was inspired by that arch that was constructed for the set.
Seen an equivalent game set in North Africa, and they actually reference it in an episode of Big Bang Theory, where
Campaign for North Africa. Yeah. And it is. I actually did a Normandy tour, and one of the other people on the tour in attendance was games designer Richard Berg, the guy who designed that game.
Oh, really?
And it is the most unnecessarily complicated board game ever produced. It's almost unplayable.
Great stuff.
Somebody else made another game on the same scale, same huge number of counters and all the rest of it. And I think it might just be called Africa Core or something like that, which is much, much better. And at that same convention, there were 3 sets of people playing that same game on 3 tables lined up with each other. And I remember going back and checking at the end of the week to see which one had made the most progress. And some of the players had almost done the whole campaign. Others were still 4 hexes along after 7 days of gameplay. I'm thinking lots of rule checking going on probably. But is this the screen we want? No, that's a slide. That's also a slide. This one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what part you wanted.
Can you just play the last 60 seconds?
Yeah, kill the sound. So
yeah, kill the sound. If we get ratio, if I get a flag, I'll just trim it out.
Right there.
Yeah, that blows up.
And also, if you pause in sections, they're usually pretty lenient when you do.
Isn't there? But don't we see the arch, the one that I was just talking about? Isn't that's near the end, isn't it? I'm sure there's a shot of it.
That's the end right here.
It might be either further on or earlier, maybe. Maybe it's before this bit. But I'm sure that arch is on this set though. I'm not wrong, am I, Inside Man? It's on this set.
No, you're not wrong. Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a shot of it, and it kind of frames a shot. It's near the end anyway. But yeah, the set for this episode is particularly impressive. Not just the fact that they repurposed a load of stuff, but it's just incredibly effective. There's lots of attention to detail that I really, really like.
See, I always think that whenever you see a particularly bad battle-scarred city or town, that's when you can kind of see the kind of beauty in that design, the design of that destruction, if you like. Because when you see something that's relatively clean and relatively intact, you can say that you're kind of in that world. You're you're submerged into that world and everything. But it could be, it could be an existing building somewhere, which is fine, which is perfectly fine. But when you have something that is so so decayed and destroyed and in such a dreadful state, I think you can really see that there's an awful lot of work that's gone into that, and you're a little bit more submerged into the world, I think.
Yeah, I can believe that. One of the things that's interesting, if you watch the show and you're like me, you're the type of person that might pick up on chimney minutiae. The other thing that I noticed with Band of Brothers, and I remember having a conversation with Alan Tomkins about this. I said, I've noticed that you've got a different design of telegraph pole every time we're in a different country. So when we're in Holland, they have a certain configuration at the top of the pole. Again, that configuration is different in this town. It's different in France, and so on. And that was one of the things I always noticed as a kid when I went on holiday was, you're sitting in the back of the car, so you're staring at all that kind of nonsense as you're going past. The first thing I noticed in France was there were water towers everywhere, which of course we don't have over here. And you look at things like the way the lampposts are designed is different. I don't know if you remember back in the 60s and 70s, it was very common in England. We had those lampposts where they curved into like a hook at the top. With the
I do remember that. Yeah,
and that was that's the right bit, Blue. Thank you. Yeah, just have it there. They were very specific to that time period. So I noticed that Alan's very good at picking up on things like that and putting in those little details. And it might seem fastidious and over the top, but it's really not. It's that's the difference between a good production design art director team as opposed to do we need to do that? No one will notice. Well,
and of course it's the detail that sells it, isn't it?
Yeah. So masters of the air. Get your fucking chimneys right. Anyway, sorry. Any excuse to bring that up. So I mean, talking about the production effects in this one, we've got some great stuff, particularly this sequence. Can we play a little bit of this? I mean, this is really well done. There's trace of fire going off all over the place. There's special effects. Now you weren't there when this day was shot.
No, I wasn't there. No.
Talk about missing the fun bit.
Yeah. I was. Yeah, I think. I think I might have been on. Oh God, I can't remember. There was a reason for. There was a reason for us being. I think this was probably Blue Team.
I reckon you were probably all being interviewed over the shower knob incident.
Yeah.
So therefore, you probably weren't on set while this was. But this is, I mean, this episode has one action sequence in it. This is it. Apart from, some shelling and some sniping and whatnot. But this is it. It is one of the best action sequences in the entire show. It's not my favorite, but it's extremely well done. It's even, like I said, of if I we'll probably do this when we get to episode 10. If I slot the episodes in order of kind of favorite to last, episode 8 probably comes last, but it's still like gold standard television. It's still amazing, I think it's just the nature of it that it is subdued, so it succeeds in its goal, really, of portraying where the men were at that time. I found my correspondence with Peter Youngblood Hills. I'll just read it out to you quickly, who played Shifty. Hi, Peter. Sorry, hope you don't find this message rude of me. Just finished watching Band of Brothers for the umpteenth time, and then I elaborated a bit about the various people I knew who worked on it, including the friend who stayed with me. And then I said, I just wanted to say how much I loved the way you played that final scene when you speak to Winters and say, when I get home, I don't rightly know how I'm going to explain all this. Just really well played. I really think the last 2 episodes are actually probably my favorites in the show, just because of all the emotive arcs coming to an end. it's so powerful. Anyway, I hope one day in the future we might get to work on something together. Blah 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 blah. And then I said we've got mutual friends and so on and so on. Best wishes, Lance Nelson. And he replied to me actually that same day. Thank you, Lance. Yes, anything to help us understand what in the world happened in those days is certainly needed now. Bless you for the compliments, etc., etc. And so it was really nice. So and shortly after that, his Facebook page got hacked. So it's now redundant. Yeah, he set up one for Shifty Powers. There's a Facebook page for Shifty Powers now. Yeah. So anyone want to say anything else about the visuals or production design for this episode?
It's actually one of my favorites. I think because of the terrible state of the sets, the destruction, and because I know which parts of the sets were repurposed, and other buildings were sort of moved into different positions, or things were part of the set might have been struck, and then another piece reconstructed it in a different position, and it was just great to get on that. For all intents and purposes, same set. We're walking the same piece of ground that we were walking on in Carentan and so on. But of course, the topography is completely different. So it was kind of quite disorientating. But I loved it. I just loved the feel of it. I mean, we were walking through, me and a few of the lads, just talking about the show, and we said, this is probably the one set that feels perhaps the most realistic. It feels real. It feels like we are actually in a town that's been heavily bombarded by shell fire and mortar fire, and because the cameras were pretty much out of the way. And there was a little bit of a trot up to the honey wagon and up to catering and what have you. So we kind of felt really quite, I suppose, isolated on this set. There was a lot of smoke around. The smoke machines were going constantly, to create that haze, that fog, and it just felt very, very real. Until you knock on the walls and you suddenly realize that's just wood and plaster rather than stone. But it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful set to be on.
I think it shows. I mean, it's very, very visceral, isn't it? The whole experience.
Yeah, really, really was. Yeah.
And it's interesting reading about, as History Bro said, this is an area that's of typography of Europe that's riven with historical conflict. And I've just been reading about it. There's like huge amounts of information on this section of the Maginot Line, which intersected with Hagenau, which is why there's so many forts. There's a whole train system that runs under the town that connects all the forts together.
Oh, wow.
Which is just sort of that casemate is now maintained as a museum. So I feel like I'm going to try, and that's going to be a box of mine to tick. I think I might have to go there. History Bro, we're organising a trip to Hagenau. History Bro does Hagenau. There you go. That's great. Great title for a stream for your channel, I feel. Excellent. Anyone else want to say anything about the production design? Great comments there.
Probably the night scenes, and they do make the shots a little bit tighter as well, just to just sort of like really draw you in a bit more. If the city looks like it's all ruined and battered and realistically as well, and doesn't look like a set, then it's done its job.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's head into the last section 4.
Remember what you were taught? guarantee you gravity will take care of the rest.
Question is, do you have a favorite line or moment in this episode? And if so, what is it? And we'd like to also hear your comments in the chat regarding that. So, Blue Collar, have you got a favorite line or moment?
More like the sequence, but yes, when they're trying to save his life and he's gargling, you hear the blood coming out, and just the narration from Webster, because just the way he says it, where basically, what's going to be said about him in history and what his family will get, like a notification, they'll get a letter, but how he's 20 he's 20 years old.
That's really powerful, that bit, because it sort of underscores the futility of those letters in a way. It's like you don't really know when you get a letter saying your son died bravely.
That's what he says,
die bravely attacking an important hill, or was
that's
he
what
actually,
you want to hear? Yeah,
or was he accidentally electrified when he plugged the toaster in and it was attached to his rifle or something? You just don't know. But that's a good sort of moment for all of that. And then you got the reaction of the guy, the mailroom guy, sort of, maybe going on missions isn't so great after all, because I've just had to see one of my buddies get blown apart. History bro.
I don't know. Possibly the bit where Winters tells them they don't have to go on the second raid. Possibly that.
Yeah,
I remember the very first time I watched Band of Brothers, and I quite literally felt a weight off my back when he sort of said that, which is sort of great writing, great storytelling. If the audience can feel that. But yeah, there's not a fantastic number of sort of standout lines for me. I do think it's. Are we giving out 10? We're giving out of 10 in this bit.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the very end.
But the whole episode. You said it was one of your least favourites. I wouldn't say.
I did qualify that by saying I don't really have a least favourite. I don't really have a least favourite.
Me too. I think
for me, I guess this one will probably end up near the bottom.
For me, it's a middling. Personally, for me, it's a middling one. So it's still, as you say, it's still a golden watch, diamond encrusted.
Oh yeah.
But it'd be a middling one. It's probably not in my top 2 or 3. It's probably not my bottom 1 or 2. I really enjoy it. I like it. I think it works. Well, they all work, but for what it is, it's supposed to be like we said at the beginning, a tight story, a very small bit of the war involving a small number of men, which is a completely different beast to telling all of 101st's involvement in Market Garden, for example. Completely different thing. And yet done superbly, in my opinion. And again, the death of Jackson, it could have been over the top. It could have been overwrought, and I don't know. It just wasn't. It was all done very, very well, I thought. So yeah, probably that bit, I suppose.
Excellent. Northern.
Yeah, probably when they were told that they were successful on the. They were getting praised for achieving the raid, and they should be proud, but they still don't look proud. It's like, yeah, we did the mission, but we still lost a guy. It still doesn't feel like a victory.
Inside Man. That shower scene. Brings back all the good memories for you.
Yeah, all those happy memories. I think it's probably Webster's arrival. And the illustration of the difference between how he's treated and now. I like that. I like that that kind of that sort of split between how he's treated and Picante, and I like that.
It's interesting that you said that, because I'm picking something a bit similar, because one thing that really resonated with me this time around what was that theme, and in particular the scene where Picante arrives. He took an injury at Bastogne. He's back. Everybody's just so pleased to see him, immediately greeted. Whereas Webster arrives, it's like everyone's forgotten who he is because he wasn't at Bastogne.
Yeah.
So the scene, and it's not just the Conti arriving; it's the look that Ian Bailey as Webster does in that scene, where he's like, "Fucking hell, I didn't get that." Oh yeah, well you weren't at Bastogne, so it's really good. Dan Caddy also likes Winter's the fake mission report. That scene as well. I mean, if I've got a favourite line in this episode, it's Winters when he says, "That's good because I want you all to get a good night's sleep and then report that you didn't find anyone and the mission was completed and it was uneventful." And and they all sort of, no one says anything, like they're all looking at each other like, is he serious? What? And then and that's the sort of, that's a key decision for him to have taken as a leader. Half the people in that room probably would have died, maybe all of them. So yeah, I do.
Yeah, and History Bro's right. There's a kind of a tension running through the episode, and when you hit that moment, there is a kind of a, it's a kind of a real kind of relief, because it's kind of winding you up. The episode is winding you up like a tight spring, and you're just about ready to sort of, go in with them. And then you get that, and it's just such an amazing relief. I mean, that is a great moment.
Ratings out of 10, then please. We'll go in the same order. Blue, and in the chat, put your ratings out of 10 now. And if you haven't voted in the poll, vote in the poll now.
I would say, and like you said, Lance, no disrespect, but like it's I guess 8.5 for me, just because of I wouldn't say it's a pacing issue, but like something, I don't know, there's like something compared to the rest of this show that it's not like it's a bad episode, but it just didn't capture me the way certain other episodes did. I'm not sure.
No, I get that. I get that.
I'm not sure what it is about. I'm not saying the writing's not bad. The acting's fantastic, good battle sequences, but we've all been on certain episodes where 10 out of 10, just like, and you can't breathe. It's so much going on, and just this felt like a very slower episode. I wouldn't say filler, but I just said it's not it's a bad episode by any means. But
no, but it's like I said, it's got a subdued feeling, which I think is intentional. So in some way, maybe it's succeeding to get an 8 out of 10. But
especially after the last episode where everyone was just getting bombed, and it was really intense.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Lance, it's still, but not by any means a bad episode. I'm just, but it's still a great episode.
History Bro.
Well, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. Yeah, simple as that. In the sweep of the whole series, it's somewhere in the middle. But yeah, 10 out of 10. Not really anything I can fault it on, really. There's nothing in it where I sort of, it sort of piques my... It sort of irks me in any possible way. So, yeah, I can't really fault it. I think it's great. If I was going to tell a story about a single raid, I couldn't do any better. I really couldn't,
Northern.
Yeah, probably maybe an 8, because, like I said, it's a calmer episode, and I think I kind of like, that's how I like it a little bit. But it's not the best episode, but even as a weaker episode, it's still stronger than any other strong episode from a very weak show.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
19 people have taken part in the vote. Vote now if you haven't. I'm going to close the poll in a second. Inside Man.
It's a 10. Definitely a 10 from me.
I mean, mainly because you're in the shower scene, obviously. Which,
it's mainly that.
That bumps it from an 8 to a 10, just like the makeup lady did.
Yeah, but it was. I don't know. Because you have a lot going on. There is actually a lot going on that's been condensed into what feels like a relatively short episode.
Yeah.
But emotionally, there's actually a lot going on. There might not be an enormous amount of action, but certainly emotionally, we get pricked by these different things, all these different events that are really starting to, sort of make us sit up now. We have the eventuality of them all coming out of it alive. The prospects of them living and manage to get through to the end of the war. The futile mission thing. Should they be taking chances? And them being on edge. The arrival of Webster, him kind of being a little bit of an outsider. So I think emotionally there's an awful lot going on here. And I think that's probably why it's a 10. And of course, visually, it just looks incredible.
Yeah, I'll give it a 9 for all of the same reasons. And I've given episodes of this show a 10 before. The only reason I'm not giving this episode a 10 is because I would have preferred Private Jackson to have been a character that we'd met earlier, so that his death was even more impactful. I think that's the one thing they could have done better. His death is very impactful. His death scene is excellent, but he is a character we feel like we've only just met. Now, if we'd seen a bit of him on D-Day and a bit of him in Holland, and because I don't think he's a replacement, is he, Jackson? I don't think so.
No, I don't think he is. No.
I'm not 100% sure on this, but I remember doing some reading. I'm pretty sure he was on Market Garden at the very least. And he must have been in Bastogne because he's giving the dirty look of, hey, I was in Bastogne, where were you? Because I think one of his lines is about one of the other guys breaking out and all that kind of thing. So this is an Easy Company veteran, but he doesn't feel like an Easy Company veteran because we haven't met him before. That's my only gripe about this episode. If I'd had, because we don't really get to know Muck and Pinkella that well. They have a line here and a line there, but they're always in every episode.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that much more when I've watched it on repeat. They don't have a lot of key scenes, but they're always around.
Yeah, they're ubiquitous, I think. Ubiquitous.
Yeah, I think rather than have a guest actor come in and do this part, and Andrew Lee Potts was very much up and coming at the time. He's just directed his first feature film, actually. But I would have preferred it to have been, and I'll say this about a couple of characters actually, because we see somebody get killed in the next episode as well. Private Yannick, I think their name is, who's played by Tom Hardy, and again, it's another guest actor coming in and doing that sort of little role. But,
sorry, Tom who? Tom who? Who's he?
Yes, I think he's gone on to some bigger things now. But
never heard of him.
Yeah, I think again, his death was a bit sort of okay. Well, who is he? We haven't met this guy before, so that's my only gripe. But first class acting. On my vote, I haven't voted yet, so I vote for Eon Bailey. Unsurprisingly, he's in the lead at 60%. Scott Grimes 35%. Andrew Lee Potts 5%. And Colin Hanks receives no votes. Well, you are playing an officer.
I think that's unfair. I think that's quite unfair.
Well, too late now. I've closed the poll now. It's another 9 out of 10 here. So, yeah. Well, before we say our goodbyes and I let everybody plug their shit, as you know, I've been working on this very special extended supercut of A Bridge Too Far, which I uploaded to YouTube today, which they promptly blocked. So it was, I mean, it's still got a bit of work to be done, and I'm also doing an even longer version of it, which includes Operation Pegasus in the longer version. But this version is 3 hours and 40 minutes. I just wanted to show you a couple of bits, and this will probably have to be edited out later because every time I've shown a bit of this, I've had a flag. So, Mr. Inside Man, watch the titles carefully. You see any names you recognise there?
None at all.
Yeah, so these are the new credits for A Bridge Too Far with all the additional actors added in. So because there's a lot more in this, so I'm going to zoom along. We're gonna look at some other bits. So, for example, I've added in loads of titles so that you always know where you are, what day it is, where we're at in the battle, stuff like that. So that someone who doesn't know anything about Operation Market Garden can follow it. Oh, what's going on here? This wasn't in a bridge too far. What's happening? So, yeah. So you're going to see the biggest version of Operation Market Garden in this version of the film that you've ever seen. And let me find a couple of other bits. So various things with these. I've got now. So there's some stuff that's been cut out. So the James Caan storyline has all gone. So the whole scene where he's waiting for his lieutenant to be healed and so on. I don't even know how true that story is, by the way. But that for me was always the one sequence in the film that kind of didn't really work. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, and Khan is really good in that scene. But
it just slowed it down. Do you think it slowed it down quite a bit? Yeah.
And because I was adding shitloads of stuff, I felt that could go. So this is just at the end of the bridge attack, which is one of the best action sequences in a film ever made. There's Ben, what's his name? Ben Cross in the background there, moving those doors. So I was just trying to find the next bit where we I want to get to this bit. So so when Eindhoven gets liberated, we've not only got the liberation scenes from Bridge Too Far, but it's also all intercut with this stuff as well. So so we have all of this in the movie as well. What I've also done is I've combined when we have the Armada going from England to Holland, I've combined all of that sequence with the D-Day sequence as well from episode 1.
Yep.
So all of this footage is in the film as well as all the stuff that Richard Attenborough shot. Plus, and you can, if you listen to that shot, you can see I've scored it with the music from Bridge Too Far. So even these new sequences have also got music soundtracks in. So it's all been like mixed together properly. I had to finesse a lot of the edits. There's also a sequence with real footage that was filmed, all the color stuff that was filmed, all the attack in Noonan, all of this stuff. All of this is in there, with a lot of added titles with stuff like this. All the titles are done in yellow, so they match the original titles on Bridge Too Far. So it's all cut together. Yeah, I do like those scenes. There's nothing wrong with them, Dan. I just something had to go, and that was one of the things that they didn't really work with the new stuff I was cutting in. So it all felt like it didn't fit. Yeah, so this will then cut to something else from Bridge. I think we cut here to the 80-second briefing, if I remember rightly. So I think that's what you wandering past there, Inside Man. So yeah, and not everything from this episode is in, just the stuff that's relevant to Market Garden. So yeah, then we cut to Kate. And I've also put dates on everything. So we go through the whole thing from 17th of September up to the end of the operation. Another bit that works really well, cut from various different sources, is the evacuation sequence. Yeah, here. And again, I put music in it from John Addison's score. which I've got the vinyl of still. One of the things at the moment is I haven't done the German and Dutch subtitles because they were missing. So I've got to add them in again myself. So I haven't done those yet. But I know all the lines off by heart anyway, so I don't really. That gives you a gist of it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Available for $25.99. Mail orders for me. No, not really. I just wanted to whack it up for free on YouTube so everyone could see it. As soon as I put it up, it got copyrighted up the wazoo. And I thought I just put monetized fan cut just for fun. Used to be able to do that on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's blocked. It's blocked in every country. It's blocked on Mars as well. They said blocked on Mars for the future when Mars is colonized. So History Bro has suggested I put it up on Rumble. I don't have a Rumble account, so I'm going to create one specifically so I can share this version with you guys. But I think you'll enjoy it, though. If you're a big fan of Market Garden and Bridge Too Far, it feels like a film that should be 9 hours longer. You're going to enjoy this cut. And I've made it as seamless and as professional as I can. Like I said, I've even got all the titles changed and everything. And you've got all 3 titles of the ends of all 3 movies on the back. So, because I didn't want to not be crediting people for their work, of course. So, yeah, there we are.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd look forward to seeing that.
Oh, look, and just the one female who always watches my stream has arrived. Vex Electronica, good to see you. So thanks for popping in. Well, let's have a quick whip round. Who's got what coming up, Blue?
Let's see, House of Dragon tonight.
Oh yeah, that's tomorrow.
And with you tomorrow. And so for July Lance, our Tuesday, and hopefully you and Inside Man are not busy. And I know History Bro is always busy, but Tuesday we're starting off with Team America.
Oh yes,
America! Fuck yeah!
Can we do a breakdown of the sex scene and discuss all the minutiae?
See, I wonder if I can show that on YouTube because it's dolls.
I don't know if you can. I don't know about that. Still, I'm not
apparently
sure.
That scene was 10 times disgusting. They showed it to the censors, and it was all put in there deliberately, so they would tell them to cut it down. And the bits that they wanted to keep in, they managed to keep in because of those added scenes.
So they made it over racy deliberately to.
Oh yeah, he's going full on. He's like shitting on her, pissing on everything. It's just.
Oh no, I don't want to hear that.
It's 2 dolls, those.
That's to use code words if you're going to venture your language onto such topics. Okay, well let's move on.
Enough of that. All right, move on.
Yeah, I should have had my finger on the ejector seat there. So Blue, anything else, mate?
Well, yeah, you and me are doing House of Dragon, Acolyte, Nielsen ratings. I'm hanging out with you too much, man.
Well, hey, I'm the most fun person to hang out with on YouTube. What can I say? Dr. Evil, History Bro. What have you got coming up?
Right, well, there's my history channel, History Bro, as always. But the big thing that's coming up next week is the general election in the United Kingdom on the evening of Thursday the 4th through to the morning of the 5th. And at lotuseaters.com we're doing an all-night stream from 7 p.m. until the wee hours, until maybe 6 a.m. or who knows exactly when.
Do you want me to call you at 6 a.m. to commiserate you in the morning?
Yeah, what's your last video on there? I think they were smearing Nigel Farage again, but we've Hull has managed to finally get someone representing us, though, Neil Hunter. Sorry? So hopefully he might probably get in.
Well, anyway, let's not diverge into politics. We don't do on this channel. But yes, that is happening. And if you want to do a 24-hour stream, you know where to go.
On lotuseaters.com on that evening. It's actually streaming on Rumble. It's funny you mentioned Rumble. Right. And so there'll be lots and lots of guests on Lotus Eaters. So that's sort of the main thing this coming.
So will you be operating the swingometer?
We actually have got a green screen in our second studio, and Dan Tubb, if anyone knows Dan Tubb, works at Lotus Eaters, he'll be doing sort of a parody of a swingometer thing. Yeah.
Right. Parody of a swingometer thing. This I have.
Yeah. Oh, and the last thing I did on history side of things, as I know Lance doesn't necessarily want to talk about politics. Last thing I had was all about the career of Crassus, and I talked to the clip on YouTube is all about Spartacus, where I mentioned, at least in passing, the old Kirk Douglas, Tony Curtis film. And so that's the last bit of content history-wise on lotuseaters.com for me, is all about Crassus and Spartacus. So,
well, people have been asking me, are we going to do Band of Brothers Pacific? And we are, but not straight after this, because I feel like I want a change of historical eras. But before the end of the year, we are going to be doing the first season of Spartacus, the one that the late great Andy Whitfield was in. 2 episodes per stream, because their episodes are quite tight. They're a tight, lean 40 minutes, if I remember rightly. So we'll be doing 2 episodes per stream. I don't know if you want in on that history, bro, but you'd be very welcome.
Cheers.
And
I've never actually watched it, but
you know what, you should. I think it's good. It's good. It's very much in that style of 300 that was quite trendy at the time.
Right.
But I do feel like they try to make it a very this is how it was depiction of what it was like to live in that time. Obviously slightly glamorized in a dramatic context, but it'd be great to have you on, because then we'd be getting your I've just seen it, oh my god, sort of each week, you know. And
plus, I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet too much, but I absolutely know the original ancient accounts of Plutarch and Cassius Dio and Appian, and I can actually, as always, talk about the real history.
Which would be really interesting, because I that whole period of Roman history, I find really fascinating. So
it's funny because you actually mentioned about Crassus last week, and after you mentioned it, the first thing I did was I thought I'd order a book on Crassus. So I've got a book, just got this book on Crassus. It's called Crassus, the First Tycoon.
Well, if I could quickly say anything, get Plutarch's life on Crassus, because any secondary book you get about it, they're simply reading Plutarch.
Yeah,
so go
of course.
So go straight to the horse's mouth and just read Plutarch.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything on the Caesars. It's always kind of a distillation of Suetonius, isn't it?
Or Tacitus, yeah.
Or Tacitus, yeah. Funny enough, I was actually going to go through the annals tonight. Funny enough, which I haven't done for a long time, so I'm gonna crack on with that tonight. But yeah, so I got you to thank for that. So, I mean, it's always interesting to get a modern take on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Tom Holland's Rubicon is excellent, for example.
Yeah, it's an excellent book, superb book. I thought was it Guy de la Bedouille did a couple of books on one was Populus, which is a really good one on Roman society. Another one called Gladius, about the Roman army, and there was another one called Praetorian. Obviously, it's about the Praetorian Guard,
right.
and obviously the eventual kind of disbandment of the Praetorian Guard after the situation with Pertinax. So so I got you to thank for that. So giving me all this reading material that I want to. What was it Cicero said? Was it whoever? Excuse me, and I might be paraphrasing slightly. Was whomsoever ignores history is destined to remain forever a child. So I think, and I think I think this kind of stream itself, and everything that you're doing as well, is brilliant. I mean, I love your enthusiasm for history. I love watching your enthusiasm for history on your channel.
Oh, thank you.
And on Lotus Eaters, it's absolutely fantastic. And if anybody hasn't checked it out, you've got to check this guy out. What he does, he's amazing. He really is amazing. And also with what Lance is doing with these kind of things as well, with this Band of Brothers stream. History is so important. It's such an important thing. And we have to remind ourselves of, how we got here.
Yeah. Well, it's that old adage that if you don't learn from the mistakes of history, you are forever destined to repeat it, I think is the phrase. So very much true. Northern, what have you got coming up?
Well, apart from House of Dragon tomorrow and Losers Lounge on Tuesday and Nielsen ratings on Tuesday, reviews I'm still unsure at the moment. I might try and do Horizon if I can catch it, but Friday I will be doing my own bastard breakdowns of Steve Martin's classic comedy LeJack, and I'll be doing that with Critical and another guest. I have now forgotten, but I need to check later. And if anyone else wants to pop on, you can as well. Blue, whatever. I'm all for new guests.
Classic comedy, man.
Yeah.
Very
I was
good.
born a poor black boy.
Right. Well, on that note, I'll just tell people we've got a few things coming up. I've got 3 interviews booked for July already. Dates will be locked down pretty soon, but I think most of them are going to be 2 of them are going to be in the first week of July, I believe. One of them is with producer Charles Band. This man has 437 producing credits on IMDb, 89 directing credits. He is the man behind all of those science fiction, fantasy, straight to video films that you rented out with great tenacity in the 1980s, some of which you thought were good and others of which you were like, what? But
some of which are now classics.
They are classics.
They are classics, yeah.
So we're talking about films like Reanimator, Ghoulies, Trancers, which spawned about 7 sequels. This man has been in the business for a really long time. Real Naughty Vice Girls, I haven't seen that one. But he also did all the Puppet Master films. So he's been around. Yeah, he's been around for absolutely ever. I mean, I could be scrolling here all night. It's a very, very long list. I've also got producer, director, and actress Nikki Marshall coming in. She should have been on with us in June, but she's a very busy lady, quite hard to pin down. She's just directed her first feature film, Summer of Violence, but she was also in season 3 of The Shield in 7 episodes, played a recurring character, one of my favorite shows of all time. Maluna Jackson is also coming in early July, actress who was in How to Get Away with Murder. She was also in Chicago PD, which is when I followed her career from. She's got an amazing list of credits already. Is someone I firmly believe is going to win an Oscar in her lifetime. So I'm going to get her on the channel now while I can. But we've been corresponding for ages. It's been difficult to pin down a date, but I should have her on within a week. So 3 fantastic guests from the industry, the creative industry, already for July. I've just interviewed guest number 65. I've got 35 to go until I hit 100. Don't forget also on July 14th, which is 2 Sundays time, that is technically my stream's 2-year anniversary. And it should also be the week we're doing the last episode of Band of Brothers. So I think I'm going to have 2 separate streams that day, depending on whether or not I go to a rave on Saturday, but all to be determined. Yeah, great, fantastic. Well, it just remains for me to say thanks very much for everyone coming and watch. Really do enjoy talking about this show. It is one of the best television series ever made, with some of the best acting, production design, art direction, special effects, writing. It's a top quality show across the board, and we're going to be seeking out more shows of a similar quality and dissecting them for you and bringing them to your attention so that you too can enjoy these things if you haven't seen them already. And if you do, well, you're gonna have to watch them again, aren't you? Need a part 2. So thanks to everyone in chat who's commented. Thanks to my panel: Blue Collar Loser, History Bro, The Inside Man, aka Retropolis Now, aka Man in Shower, Northern English Bastard. We will be back on Sunday, probably at the same time, to do this. So hopefully, and then Yeah, there's a stream that I moved that Keith's mentioning. It's just a best of British review that I'm supposed to be doing tomorrow, but if I get around to it, not an important thing. That's it from us. So do like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, we'll catch you again real soon. Bye-bye.